I want to introduce you to Katharina. She ate, she drank, she moaned, she grunted, she made animal sounds, she farted, ooh, she farted, and she defecated. They use terms like idiot to describe her, a mentally deranged idiot with an incurable brain disease. They refer to patients like her as the most miserable imbeciles, and these were common terms. I get a mental image in my head of this one they call idiot, the one whose name was Katharina. I picture her staring off into space, a blank stare, mouth hanging open, possibly drooling. Now the bell was about to toll on young Katharina's life. The curtain was about to shut, but not before something startling would happen on her deathbed, something that medical staff and professionals said was virtually shattering. This virtually shattering event that took place ended all consideration for controlled euthanasia in their minds. The call for Dr. Jack Kevorkian was off the table.
There's no law here.
What was this event that the doctors witnessed to their utter astonishment and amazement? It was when this one they labeled idiot, who had never spoken, suddenly broke out into song. Where does the soul find its home? It's peace, peace, heavenly peace.
Well, a couple problems with you. You had some pitchy spots here and there, you know what I mean? You lost the melody a little bit.
Where? I can't sing.
When you first started the song off, it was a little weird and there was a lot of pitchy spots all over.
The medical staff and professionals reported that her face was transfigured and she was spiritualized. She sang for at least a half an hour before she quietly passed away. This is one of the topics I mentioned on my new introductory video you can find on the homepage. It is very related to the topic of life after death. The official term, what we're about to discuss here, is terminal lucidity, or lighting up before death. Welcome to the topic of terminal lucidity, and welcome to the channel, Into the Light. If you're new here, thank you very much for watching. My subscribers, thank you very much. I appreciate your support. Now I'm going to start off with this question here regarding terminal lucidity. If lucid experience suddenly emerge in patients with severe brain disorders or neurological diseases that have rendered them unresponsive and modern medicine deems such occurrences are highly improbable, could this serve as evidence that consciousness is not solely dependent on the brain? And we have a highlighted book here I want to introduce to you called Threshold. I'll throw the name on the screen so I don't butcher it. Well, I can at least pronounce his first name. So the author of the book Threshold here, Alexander, is one of many in the medical community that are at least open. They are open, they are curious, they are exploring evidence with an open and curious mind, and that's what we're going to do today on the subject of terminal lucidity.
But why?
And why would we want to study terminal lucidity with an open, curious, inquisitive mind? Is because we want to know, is there something we can learn? Is there something to be revealed in these moments that we're all going to face as we traverse over from life into death? When I'm studying subjects like this, like terminal lucidity, I'll read books like the Threshold book here I mentioned. I also have several research papers by medical professionals that are interested in studying the subject. I also will read some of the opposite views, and I've recently started turning to AI sources, and this is what ChatGPT says about the question that I just posed to you earlier.
If the phenomenon of terminal lucidity could be reliably demonstrated, and if it could be shown that these lucid moments occur independently of the brain's typical function, especially in patients with severe neurological impairment, this could indeed provide indirect support for the idea that consciousness might not be entirely dependent on the brain. This would raise important questions about the nature of consciousness, and potentially offer a basis for arguments about its continuation after death.
As you can see, AI is in agreement that we are on an open quest for examining the evidence. But first, let's go here to the definition of terminal lucidity. What is terminal lucidity? It is, in this paper called Terminal Lucidity, a Review and a Case Collection, the unexpected return of mental clarity and memory shortly after death in patients suffering from severe psychiatric and neurological disorders that is known from terminal lucidity, the unexpected return, the sudden return, like in the case of Katharina. It says that some of these cases of terminal lucidity can be found in medical literature for the past 250 years, and these happen in patients with severe brain abscesses, tumors, strokes, meningitis, dementia, Alzheimer's disease, schizophrenia, and other affective disorders. And these accounts suggest that during terminal lucidity, memory and cognitive abilities may function by neurological processes different from those of the normal brain. This next paper agrees with the definition and is called Terminal Lucidity in Pediatric Oncology Clinic. And it says that the sporadic occurrence, so it's a sporadic occurrence of unusual, enhanced mental clarity before death, witnessed by pediatric oncologists and medical professionals, is referred to as, quote, lighting up before death. And this third paper agrees with the definition. It's called Terminal Lucidity in Patients with Chronic Schizophrenia and Dementia. And it says it's the unexpected return of mental clarity and memory shortly before death, called terminal lucidity. Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon, he writes the foreword in this book by medical doctor Raymond Moody. He writes this book, Proof, 7 Reasons to Believe There's an Afterlife. And he writes number 4 in this book is terminal lucidity. We'll briefly check out some of his highlights. And Dr. Alexander writes in the foreword that terminal or paradoxical lucidity is the apparent brief coming back to life with full cognition, emotional and communicative skills of people thought to have irreversible brain damage. So why would the good Dr. Raymond Moody call it proof? It is because all the cumulative evidence, all the cumulative case, all converge on one thing. They all lead to, if somebody was to study all the lines of evidence for the case of an afterlife without bias and without prejudice, with an objective open mind, they would all come to the same conclusion. That is his argument, one of his base arguments in this book.
For those who are concerned about the question of an afterlife, I now say that it is rational for somebody to say, on the basis of what we have now, that they are confident that there's an afterlife. What set of concepts do you use to connect the stories to the statement that there's an afterlife? And that has always been unsolved, but I say it's solved now. And so that's why I'm confident. If somebody wants to drill down on this and test me on it, I'm ready. As a professor of logic, I can defend it.
Dr. Moody says in reason number 4, terminal lucidity, that these patients are on the verge of dying, but they spring to life in an amplified form of lucidity. A few highlights from this book, Proof of Life After Life, and it says that these are happening with people with no brain activity. They have had no interaction possibly for some time, no speech, and strokes, maybe Alzheimer's like we said earlier. But this one that really stands out is from an avowed atheist. Okay, he got turned off by religion, and he said it was the strict dogmatic religion that turned him off early on. But this was a case of his father was passing away, and the nurse had an instance of the silent stethoscope, so they could detect no heartbeat. And then the doctor came in and validated what the nurse had heard, that there was no heartbeat. And the doctor says that there was no signs of life. They were unable to detect any signs of life, but suddenly Suddenly the father sprang back to life. His eyes were wide, and he looked off in the distance, and he said, "I love you." Okay, this is the last words this atheist heard was his father saying, "I love you." And it made him believe in, it didn't really make him go back to religion, but it made him believe in the afterlife. It made him embrace spirituality. And it says that his divine rule was the last words of what his father said. And his return to death, he said that the only divine words to live by would be, "I love you." And this is also words that we can understand and we hear from our Heavenly Father. To live, God is love, and to love God and love your neighbor as yourself.
Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God.
Have you ever written an essay that has earned you $300,000? Well, Dr. Pim Van Lommel has. He has written this essay. He is a cardiologist. He submitted it to Evidence for the Continuation of Consciousness. The Continuity of Consciousness is what it's titled. And he agrees. He agrees that these experiences, like near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, vertical perceptions, terminal lucidity, deathbed visions, they all converge. All the evidence converge and builds a cumulative case for evidence for the continuation of consciousness, or evidence for the afterlife. Dr. Pim Van Lommel, he writes a book I'll throw up on the screen, but he is one of the top researchers in the near-death experience research, and he's conducted many studies, written many books and papers, and this one in the Continuity of Consciousness, he says in his abstract, this $300,000 paper, consciousness seems to be non-local, and our brain is a facilitator of consciousness rather than a producer of consciousness. He says the almost unavoidable conclusion that the time of physical death, consciousness will continue to be experienced in another realm. So this is directly tied to these cases of terminal lucidity. He also says that, like the case he's arguing for, in the case that I brought up earlier about the collective evidence here, he says all these findings make the concept of the continuity of consciousness highly probable. Quote, highly probable is what he says. These medical professionals and researchers all seem to be agreeing, the ones who study this subject of terminal lucidity with an objective, open, and curious mind, all agree that there is light after death. There is evidence in terminal lucidity, this lighting up in death. There is evidence for a case for the afterlife. And Dr. Raymond Moody writes in his book that terminal lucidity is objective and observable. It is objective and observable, which makes it especially unique among other transcendent experiences. These cases of terminal lucidity are objective and observable. They are happening in settings where medical professionals can verify and corroborate and record the testimonies and evidence around them. And they are happening with people with severe cases like dementia. They even call them idiots, and who have severe brain disorders, and all of a sudden they have these lucid, hyper-lucid experiences just before death. These cases of terminal lucidity are data points pointing to what some would call a white crow, pointing to evidence for the afterlife. And like Dr. Pim Van Lommel says in his essay, this compilation of evidence from terminal lucidity and other fields combined into this, it makes this cumulative case very compelling. The primary researchers in this field are open to answering the one fundamental question: is there a continuity of our consciousness? Is there life after death? And they've all studied and they've all conducted research in various fields, and all these fields are converging, and they're converging. We had one white crow, now another white crow. Now we are figuratively standing in a field of white crows. And these primary researchers are now starting to use similar terminology like Dr. Pim van Lommel, and that this cumulative case is now making it very highly probable and using words like proof. Let's get back to the cases of terminal lucidity. Now, I don't want you to get your hopes up thinking, yes, you're sitting there on your deathbed with your loved one, you might get a glimpse into eternity. Yes, that would be very lovely, and some of these cases you will see in this book, and we'll get to the book Threshold here in a minute. Yes, they do have evidence and cases of terminal lucidity, and they are very heartwarming. But yes, there is a reason they are called white crows, is because they are relatively rare, 6%. Now let's go to the book Threshold. Now let's go to our featured book here. We have Threshold, Terminal Lucidity and the Border of Life and Death. It is our featured book because some of the other ones I introduced to you earlier, they have various topics in it, but this one is primarily focused on terminal lucidity. So if you're interested in the subject, pick it up. And it says, like I said earlier, not to get your hopes up and sitting by your deathbed hoping for a case of terminal lucidity, because this prospective study by McElloyd in 2009 says that they are relatively rare, not extremely rare, but relatively rare. And it says the study said that they are 6% of dying patients would have an episode of terminal lucidity of varying duration shortly before their death. So they are happening, but they're happening at about 6% of those patients that are on their deathbed. Small segment of patients, not extremely rare, it says in this book. And later in the book, it has another study brought up by Peter Fenwick, and it says that it reports a slightly higher number, 14%, versus the 6%. But it also states and concludes that, yeah, these phenomena are rare, but it's irresponsible and unethical to instill a family member with undue hope that their ill relatives will have a lucid episode, like our atheist friend who we found out earlier had his father come back and tell him, "I love you," before he passed. And it says in the book that someone was expecting, they were hoping for a terminal lucidity event. And I can understand why that would help give you comfort when your family member was on their deathbed. And it says that they hoped for a last hurrah. They hoped that this last hurrah, this last terminal lucid event would happen, but it never came. Okay, don't mean to be a buzzkill there, but also want to be real with you. And let's go now to, in the book it says, it talks about Dr. Bruce Grayson. It says, when you get to these extreme cases, such as when the brain stops functioning, that you see the formula break down. You see the formula starting to break down in events like the terminal lucidity. That the brain and the mind do not seem to be the same thing. Also want to point out here real quick a case of what I've labeled fake skepticism. And it says that if one is not prepared to even consider events or data, this would be a closed-minded so-called skeptic that seem to contradict common knowledge, white crows, precisely because they contradict common knowledge, it is only a small step from open-ended scientific inquiry into dogmatism. The very opposite. Dogmatism is the very opposite of curiosity-driven data. And this book, Threshold, talks about the case I mentioned to you earlier, and that is the case of Anna Katharina Ehmer, also known as Katie. And it says that she had prolonged seizures, and she was admitted to the psych ward. She was a born idiot. This is what they called her, a born idiot. She even had one leg chopped off, one leg amputated. So, and it says that it looked like she was about to die, but she started humming. And then this humming turned into songs. Said this born idiot, Kathy, sang herself her own death songs. And it says that Katie sang for half an hour. Her face was spiritually transfigured. And it says the doctor, who, like the nurse, had tears in his eyes. So the doctors teared up, saying, I am before a medical mystery. That's what these terminal lucidity events are, medical mysteries. If required to do so, I can prove by means of section. So I can take Katie's brain and show you that Katie's cerebral cortex was utterly destroyed and that cognition was anatomically impossible. Anatomically impossible. The case of Katharina.
Peace, peace, heavenly peace.
All right, don't run off yet. I hope you enjoyed this case, this introduction of terminal lucidity. We have a lot more related topics to this, so if you're interested, if you want to learn more about terminal lucidity, you'll have to stick around, you'll have to subscribe, and thank you. Next time we talk about terminal lucidity, I'll bring up the 3 papers that I mentioned earlier. But if you want to learn, if you want to get ahead, you can go to University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies. There you can see publications, you can type in terminal lucidity and see publications, PDFs, and print them out and read them for yourself. Other related topics we have coming up on this channel, deathbed visions. And you know Stephen in the Bible had a deathbed vision. If you are aware of Steve Jobs, which I'm sure you are, the Apple founder, had a deathbed vision where he said, oh wow, oh wow, oh wow. And personally in our family, our grandmother had a deathbed vision that I'll share with you and tell you about, so stick around for those. And one final question I have for you. Was Katharina gazing into heaven on the threshold of eternity? Was she on the precipice of being carried into the bosom of a loving Father? What do you think?
No one has ever seen God, the only God who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. John 1:18.